Hi everyone, I am Ridhima Agarwal and welcome back to the CIS Top 20 Control series. This week we'll be talking about control number 11, which is secure net configuration of network devices such as routers, firewalls, and switches. Right. So before we begin, just a little bit of information about me. I recently joined about 2 months ago, JP Chase, and I've been working there as an attack analyst since then. It's been incredible. Before that, I was getting my master's in cybersecurity from NYU, and I graduated from NYU this May. I've also been a member of the Women in Cybersecurity organization since February, and I was also a recent attendee of their 2021 conference in Denver this year, which was incredible. Some other personal information about me is that I was born in India, but I've been raised in the Gulf, a couple of countries. I've moved around a bit. I love animals, and in my free time, I try and take time to volunteer at a local animal shelter. I am also a self-taught artist, and I've been making portraits since school, which is a pastime for me or a way to relax. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the definition and the importance of protective network devices to a particular organization. Then we'll be talking about its implementation and the subcontrols that are involved with control number 11. And finally, we'll be talking about the conclusion and risks involved with this particular control. So now what is control 11? By definition, it's establishing and implementing and actively managing the security configuration of network infrastructure devices. All of this is done in order to prevent attackers from actively exploiting vulnerable devices and settings in an organization structure. So by even definition, you can imagine that it's very important. So even though devices like routers, switches, and firewalls, they don't really actively connect to the public network, they are very, very important, and they should be treated just as important as regular systems that we work on, like laptops, computers, and everything else. And their security should be just as paramount, because if and when they're compromised, they can provide a very excellent standpoint to attackers to kind of leverage the possibility of attacking the entire organization. There's a lot of lateral movement involved. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. So control number 11 has 7 subcontrols. The first one, by very simple definition, is about maintaining standard security configurations for network devices. There are some standards set for each device that you get for your network, and it's very important to maintain its configuration. As we'll be seeing later on, there are also a bunch of tools that can be used to accomplish this. The second subcontrol is documenting traffic configuration rules. All configuration rules that allow traffic to flow through network devices should be properly documented in some kind of a management system to provide some kind of reference later on and to kind of give clarity on what kind of traffic is allowed, what traffic is blocked, and what kind of traffic ultimately passes through the network. So if there is some kind of need in the future, and if you want to pinpoint a particular individual's name or a particular organization's name that is entering the network, it's very important that you document whatever traffic configuration rules that you have. The third subcontrol is using automated tools to verify standard device configuration and detect changes. All the time, you're supposed to be monitoring your network device configurations against approved security configurations to make sure that they're on point, that they're updated, that they are secure enough, and that they're not outdated. So if you are, then you can define each network device to alert if there are any deviations discovered. So on the off chance that the configuration that you set for your network devices is not up to the standard, you can definitely set an alert so that it can let you know when it's time to update it or it's time to reconfigure its configuration. The fourth subcontrol is installing the latest stable version of any security-related updates on all network devices. It's absolutely very important to constantly keep your devices updated. If you're using an older version of any of your network devices, it's probably just as dangerous as not having a device at all. A lot of these old updates have attacks that have been discovered for them, which is why updates are frequently rolled out for them. So make sure that you stay on top of updating your network devices. The fifth subcontrol is managing network devices using multi-factor authentication and encrypted sessions. Multi-factor authentication is not only important for all of your personal devices and laptops, they're also important for network devices. So every time you're trying to access them, you try your best to set up multi-factor authentication, which can be some kind of biometric sensor, some unique password or a passcode or something like that. Of course, requiring them for all network devices may not be supported. A lot of devices probably don't have the accessibility for setting up multi-factor authentication as of now, but if they are, it's definitely recommended getting it. So at that point of situation, you would want to do some kind of remote administration. Otherwise, multi-factor authentication is important to set up. The sixth subcontrol is using dedicated workstations for all network administrative tasks. Network administrative tasks are something which can be done specifically to each network device. Since these are very important in configuring and setting up the device, you want to make sure that only dedicated workstations can be used to that, and only certain network engineers can use that machine. If anyone is able to access it, if it's very easily accessible, or if they're using multiple stations that are open to the public, it's probably not safe to do such kind of configurations and administrative tasks on that particular system. Additionally, those particular workstations and machines should be segmented from the organization's primary network. And they should not be connected to the internet, because there's a lot of dangerous malware on the internet, and even a simple misclick could open up your machine to possible dangers. So additionally, it should also not be used for reading email, composing documents, or surfing the internet, like I mentioned. The last subcontrol is managing network infrastructure through a dedicated network. Make sure that connections are separated from the business use of that network. That means you're relying on separate VLANs, or even more preferably, you are entirely different physical connectivity for management sessions for network devices. Try to separate the networks that you're using, have a dedicated network that you use specifically for this, only for network infrastructure. All of your business and personal needs can be on a separately devised network, subnetwork. Now we come to implementation and the correlation of Control 11 with other subcontrols and controls. So there are a few frameworks like CIS benchmarks and the DISA sticks, which are written for the purpose of hardening of security devices. It's highly recommended that organizations use these frameworks to strengthen their security devices. There are also tools that would allow an organization to configure device scanning and reporting against the CIS benchmarks. And they can also report on any settings that may be out of compliance. It can also report against changes made from previous configurations. We'll be looking at some of these tools a little bit later on, but this is basic implementations of how you can implement Control 11. They can also utilize file integrity monitoring and properly hardening workstations. Additionally, as you might have seen the video for the control number 5 before, which was about secure configuration for hardware and software on mobile devices, laptops, workstations, and servers. If an organization has already implemented that one, you are already more than halfway to implementing control number 11, because you already have most of the tools and requirements that would be needed to set up and address control number 11. So that is very good. So if you have not watched it, you can watch control number 5 video, because they are very closely related to control number 11. So this is the system entity relationship diagram. You can see that there is a network device management system, there is multi-factor authentication, and then there are dedicated administration systems. These are all part of the subcontrols that we talked about a few minutes ago. You have network devices, which is obviously on the far right end. And on the left end, you have systems which are set up for alerting and reporting of analytics. So all of these are very intensely correlated, and this is how they are supposed to be set up to ensure a proper network, which is secure enough to handle network administrative tasks. Now, if you have, again, seen some of the previous videos, you would be aware of implementation groups. There are 3 main implementation groups for CIS controls. This is a quick refresher. Implementation group number 3 contains group 1 and 2. Group 2 contains 1, and 1 is standalone. So group 1 is for an organization with limited resources, and group 2 is for a moderate sized organization with a fair number of resources and expertise. And group 3 is for a very large corporation which has considerable amount of resources and cybersecurity experience to allocate their resources to subcontrols and controls. So comparing these 3 implementation groups to each of the subcontrols of control number 11, our first thought that we can see directly from this particular chart is that for implementation group number 1, the only subcontrol that might be possible for them to implement is subcontrol number 4, which was installing the latest stable version of any security related updates on all network devices. Since installing updates and keeping them up to date is not really something which requires a lot of resources, this makes sense. All of the other subcontrols can be only done by organizations which have moderate to high amount of resources and cybersecurity expertise. At the same time, most of the moderate sized organizations have the capabilities to implement all of these controls, which is why it's highly recommended that if you are a part of an organization of a considerable size, or if you have an organization which is of moderate size, you should be able to implement each one of these for a proper secure configuration of your network devices. Next, we can move on to the risks associated with this control. The possible risks are that attackers can, despite all of this, get into your network and modify network device configurations. This can destabilize your network completely or set up your environment to be open to other connections from outside. Of course, this is dangerous and should not be made possible at any cost. If you have unencrypted communications set up, these can be tampered with by attackers, which is of course very dangerous because sensitive information sent on the network can get out. If you have malware that gets a foothold onto your network, it can lead to credential stealing. If you're using outdated firmware, like I mentioned, keeping firmware and other devices, it's very important to be keeping up with the recent updates. So if you have outdated firmware, it would be literally like leaving the front door wide open to the entire world, because outdated firmware is as useless as not having anything at all. Common attacks such as phishing, which is basically personalized emails or some kind of social engineering attacks that are sent to you with the intention of stealing your credentials. So they can infect administrator's workstation with credential stealing malware. Like I mentioned, workstations should not be able to connect to the internet, and they should not be used to check your email or any personal social media accounts or anything like that, because it's very highly likely that you might be the victim of a phishing attack, and you can expose not only yourself and not only your workstation, but the entire network of your organization to credential stealing malware. Finally, we'll be talking about the cost. So there are some tools. There is the NNT Change Tracker Gen 7 R2 tool, and there is the Nipper tool. These tools can be used for monitoring configuration changes and change management. Like I mentioned earlier, there are also frameworks like the DICE sticks. They are useful, and more importantly, they are free, which means any organization, big or small, can use them for their benefit and keep their network secure. For configuration, credential, device scanning, and reporting against the CIS benchmarks, tools like Inside VM or Nexpose can be used. These, however, are not free. They are Rapid7-based tools, but you can check them that they're very low cost for low to moderate sized organizations. They have not a higher cost per month, and you can save millions of dollars by having them. Most of these tools you'll see have no legal obligation to be used by an organization, but they are considered to be best practice. Many organizations, on the other hand, though, have legal requirements for change management systems, because it's important for legal purposes to document each change that you perform on your system and on your devices. This usually for every organization is a ticketed system. For change detection, open source tools like Rancid can also help. In conclusion, it's very important to note that network devices should not be ignored. They are very, very vital to an organization, And if you are going above and beyond to take care of your own personal systems and of your devices, it's also important to take care of these because they are just as susceptible to attacks, if not more. There are several cost-effective solutions that you can get. So it should not be in your mind that these cost a lot to protect. They can be very cost effective. They can range from anywhere between free to expensive. So you can pick the best possible solution for your organization and implement that. It's better than it's better than not having anything. That is all for today. I really hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you stay tuned for all the future CIS controls. Thank you so much for listening.